benvolgudes, benvolguts. Choose. Today, so while we're waiting for everybody to hop online, I don't know, Alex, were you able to could you put on the mural in the chat? I don't think I have that.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so today it's exciting. It's co-sensing. So we're bringing things down into practice. So today is the focus is going to be on specifically one tool that we use called the Iceberg, which in fact, there's the U theory, which is quite similar. We were using the Iceberg quite a long time ago, and then the U3 came about, U theory, and we love it. It's quite complementary, but it's a little bit different. But before we get started full on, I want to give a warm welcome to my colleague, Carla Guay.
Hi, all.
Yeah. So Carla is our reference person working with rural municipalities. So I think you're up to almost 50 community processes at this point. Yeah. So yeah, she's very well, anyway, it's an honor to work with you today.
Same for be here.
Yeah.
You guys.
So today, if everybody wants to, while we're waiting for everybody else to join, if you want to go to the slide 24 in the Community Catalysts mural, which I think you have the link at the bottom in the chat. So we're in the agenda. So we wanted to first kick off today because it's going to be on co-sensing, and essentially just to give a couple words before we show the video. Co-sensing is all about that collective effort to identify what is going on that we have to either harness as our strengths or resolve and reconcile as there are challenges that could actually be these leverage points. The other element that we're going to be introducing also is this concept of leverage points. I'm pretty sure quite a few of you were familiar with leverage points because I asked it another time, but for us, just as a reminder, who is familiar with leverage points? And it's okay if you're not, that's even better, and then we can go real deep. Okay, so there's one that's a no. Anybody who is familiar with leverage points? Okay. Or puntos palanca. Okay, thank you. So what we're gonna do is make a little bit of a change, actually. Sorry, Alex. So we'll do the intro and the video session, but then we'll do a bit of a pause and look at the work that you did on the frameworks, right? So we are connecting with local frameworks, activist frameworks, traditional ancestral frameworks coming from what we were doing last week, and really these first two phases are all about frameworks. And then we bridge that, we work on that in breakout rooms, and we answer any questions, and then we bridge that with the iceberg of leverage points, which is another framework, very practical to help us identify these leverage points. And we're going to use the case study of Santa Pau. So Carla is going to pretend a little bit to put on the hat of somebody from Santa Pau, which is a small village here in La Garrocha. And we're going to interview her. So we're going to do a bit of a role play. All of you are going to be the International Committee of Expert Consultants in community processes. So you can put on your hat at that point, and we get to interview Carla, whose name will be Vidal from Santa Pau. And we'll try doing the iceberg or get into the iceberg by actually doing it. Okay, so we'll explain that when we get to that point, and then we'll do the clopening, so closing the session and intro for the homework. All clear? Okay, super. All right, so we can do the video then, and then the homework.
That we live in today. This empire is based on centralization, extraction, and accumulation, where rural areas are considered simply as urban peripheries. At the local level, this means that people aren't as involved in their communities anymore. There's an exodus of rural youth who move to cities and don't return. Local economy is considered obsolete with the arrival of chain stores. And the only thing left behind is tourism or resource extraction to feed the global consumistic machinery. Many communities feel fragile, alone, and even depressed, seeing the degeneration of their territories and a hopeless future that brings more individualistic and fragmented local cultures. But is this the only way? Is there a way that we can face these challenges together and co-create a regenerative future? There certainly is. The first step is to recuperate the informal and traditional communication channels, like local gatherings and community councils, and to update and scale these with the use of social media. These communication channels do not depend on formal centralist structures. And are spaces where we can get together and talk about our challenges and our dreams. Through these conversations, we can reconnect with our local and singular identities. We can do so by answering the question, who are we? A fundamental question that can help us generate a development model that is rooted in place and in the community. Our present times are defined by accelerating changes, and in this context, it is not an easy endeavor to express who we are. Our local community cultures are not created anymore by the people who have been living and evolving for ages in the same place. Rather, our local communities are now made up of a complex network of cultures and perspectives coming from different corners of the world. But is this an obstacle to be able to co-create a regenerative local culture rooted to place? Definitely not. In fact, on the contrary, as creativity and resilience emerge from difference, not from similarity. To harness what a different perspective can bring us, we have to be able to truly listen. This is not always easy, because many of us have been raised in patriarchal cultures which push us to be self-assured and determined, and to feel like we know exactly where we're heading towards, even if we have no idea. Perhaps this is the gift of these changing times. We don't have a better idea of where we are headed, as every day brings new changes, but we do know that we need better tools to be able to listen with curiosity and empathy, to value the people that live with us, and to recognize the diversity that defines us. Through these deep dialogues, we can rediscover our identities. And from there, we can develop our community into becoming a resilient home based in trust and reciprocity. By understanding how different perspectives enrich local communities, we can then understand how communities regenerate themselves through plurality and diversity. To engage in this process of co-sensing is to engage in community. It's important to deepen our understanding of how to experience community, how we spin and mix the kaleidoscope of the different perspectives that can help us understand the whole. We also need to define the main characteristics of our community, keeping in mind the deep relationship with land and place. Where does the community come from? How is it rooted in place, but born of different lands? All of this information enriches our understanding of who we are and what we are. It is also important to talk about how our community is expressed through culture. This can be done through community gatherings, rituals, customs, festivals, and other events that express and celebrate place and community, instead of adopting global festivities, practices, and values that are not rooted in place and that keep colonizing our local cultures. Finally, once we have all this information, we can begin a pattern language approach to identify which are the systemic interactions of our community. We will, of course, never become isolated local cultures anymore. The globalization process and the global empire are here to stay. But we can transcend them by glocalizing our cultures and take responsibility for our relationship with the global community, and promote decentralization, diversity, and regeneration, as well as a reciprocity with other communities in a rhizomatic organization. At the end of this dimension, you'll be able to understand much more about the essence of your community, and you'll be able to feel that home is a collective and holistic feeling rooted in place and community.
Okay, so that's the intro to the co-sensing, and to kind of warm up, we would like to invite you to go into groups. Again, we like to do it random, so you get to meet different people. So it'll be, again, groups of 3. Just to get a sense, was everybody able to at least think about the frameworks, or maybe even download something interesting from their community or movement? A little bit, that's okay. All right. If you have frameworks that you would like to share, I have this actually from my other class, the master's course that or the dimension that we teach in community resilience. And if you want, I can give you a link to that one, but they've uploaded lots of their frameworks, which I always find fascinating, to see from the different cultures and movements what is coming out. So we'd like to put you into groups of 3, just for the next 10 or 12 minutes or so. And if you just wanted to share a little bit of the flow of your framework with your partners in the same group, and also put them into the mural in the slide. Just a second. I'll bring it up actually. Slide 24. Called Other Frameworks. Is there any questions? So essentially it would be just like, this is the framework I found that really helps us understand what is moving, and how we can understand culturally or socially or from an activist perspective the complexity of our community or nation or system. Any questions? No? Okay, all right, so I'll invite you to go into your groups. And we'll see you in a bit. All right.
Sorry, you asked for me?
Yeah. If you wanted to share a little bit of what you guys were exploring in the frameworks.
No, actually, for the last session, Neil and Lola couldn't catch the session, and we just talked about what we did, but that's not including the framework, especially for going on an example.
Okay.
Or maybe it will be healthier to share.
Yeah,
The group.
no worries then. Okay, cool. Anybody else? Thank you very much, Istam. Yeah. Was it maybe a challenging assignment, or if anybody wants to talk about what, if that was something that took a lot of research, or how the process was for you?
Yeah, maybe I could share something. Yeah, so for me it was quite an interesting exercise, because I started looking into the genesis of the Romanian people, because I was like, okay, where could I find this information? So I went basically to the oldest civilization, and because they were the ones to be closer to nature, and they were quite living in the mountain zone. So what I found is that basically most, like, they were kind of sharing the same framework as the Celts. So you have the wheel, the agricultural wheel, and it was mostly used to guide the work, the practical works, but also yeah, I found this. We have quite a famous historian of religions in Romania. I mean, it's international. It's called Eliade, and he described it also as this wheel. You could also find it in the dances. So, like in this part in Romania, we have the hora, which is also in Bulgaria. It's like people are basically holding their hands, and it's a circle. But I think it's also common in other parts of Europe, for sure. Yeah. Yeah, basically it had really quite practical uses, this wheel. But also it's present in different parts. Yeah, like dances, or I don't know, in pottery, if you think about the pottery wheel, or like things like this.
Yeah. No, that's really, really fascinating, Anna Maria. I didn't know that there was a connection with the Celts as well. Very cool. And historical. So it was a agricultural wheel as well. I didn't realize that. Very neat. Oh, thank you. I got some goosebumps at that point. I love that. Anybody else have a framework that they were exploring? Yeah, Rita.
I can go. Rita from Cooperativa Más La Sala. Well, it was difficult to find something, but I end up with the 4 phases of the moon. I'm not sure if it's specifically from the territory where I live, but you can have different parallels with the 4 seasons of the year, the different energy from the sun as well, like morning, midday, afternoon, and night, and also with the menstrual cycle, like when are you with more energy towards outside, to other people, or less, and you can also, well, I know that farmers used to take this into account, like when, depending on the moon, you can tell when to plant or not. Actually, we use this book to plan and to harvest our stuff in the edible garden. So for me, it was the example I could find.
Excellent. Yeah, and very universal as well. Super, Rita. Yeah. All right. Well, it's I don't know if anybody else wants to share. Maybe we have time maybe for one more before we get into the next bit. And if there's nothing else, I'll also, if something comes to your mind in the next week or weeks, you have here in the slide number 24, the homework other frameworks. So you can just pop them on there, and I can see if I can populate it with some of the other ones that our students in the master's program were discovering, which were pretty cool as well. But nobody with the Roma wheel, so I'm loving that. That's great. Okay. All right, so these frameworks, if we're thinking about co-sensing, right, I'll just pull out a couple of the key words of that video. So we're talking a lot about like this diving deep and really getting into like what's going on. So basically it's the diagnosis phase, right? The research or the reflection and the evaluation phase. What's going on? What is bubbling underneath the surface that we don't really see, but we feel, and it's definitely impacting what's going on, right? So what we're going to be doing is identifying, using the Iceberg model, which I'll explain in just a moment, patterns and outliers to identify the leverage points. But, and this might be just something as a homework, as an extra, if you have some time in the car or while you're weeding in your garden, see how these frameworks that you guys were also exploring, so the Roma wheel or the phases of the moon, etc., how they also can help pattern, help find outliers, and even find leverage points. Okay. So I'll share my screen now, and I'll just explain first what a leverage point is. Just a second. Am I sharing my screen? Not yet, eh? Am I now? Yeah, okay, good. Sorry, I've got the 2 screens going on and I'm not really used to this. Okay, so leverage points, actually, to really get into it, I hugely, highly, infinitely recommend that you get to know Donella Meadows. I'm sure a lot of you already know her. But if you're able to read anything by her, so she wrote here, Thinking in Systems, and she also has a very short essay, only 10 pages, that's free to download, which is called Leverage Points, purely, by Donella Meadows. She wrote it. It was literally from a speech that she was connected to something very deep that day. And they wrote down her speech word for word, because it was so dead on. And she is a long time activist, and she had been studying basically social and ecological movements since birth. She passionate ecologist as well, and she started to observe. She was an excellent observer, and really to be a community catalyst, really that's what we have to do, is to observe. And just a second, I'll just put that there. And the leverage points that she identified actually were multiple, and they're kind of put here, but it's still a little bit abstract. And essentially what a leverage point is, and maybe you can see my finger and this thing here just to kind of identify. A leverage point is basically indicating that the system is out of whack. The system is off balance. And we can see that in everything. It's a systemic crisis, right? Climate change, political crises, economic crises, war, still deep poverty, etc. So what happens is, people who are moved to do something about this, to fight for justice, activists in general, what happens is we respond or react exactly to what we see. But what she said is, no, activists, you have to stop. You have to stop and think and reflect and connect. She says, what you're doing basically is jumping right on this point here, or maybe a little bit above, but you're not changing anything. You're tiring yourself out. You are burning yourself out. You're not changing the system. To change the system, you have to stop, reflect, co-sense, diagnose, do a proper diagnosis, right? And sometimes it makes me think of my father, who's an indigenous activist from Peru, and he was very, very, very obviously like traditional, cultural, and also very political. But he would also say the same thing. He said, to do any action, you have to sit down and think about it. He's like, you cannot jump up and react, because when I was a little girl, maybe I did a lot of that. So he said, no, think about it. Think what is going on. And so Donella Meadows did a brilliant job, and she started saying, what are you seeing? Like, what is it's at the top of the iceberg, she said in one of her talks, actually. And one of her students, Peter Senge, took her up on that word, and he made a model called the Iceberg Model, which is now and that was in the late 1990s. And it's really taken off because it's a framework, just like what you were doing with the gypsy wheel, Ana Maria, it puts into a shape, something that's really hard to understand. Even this, I find sometimes hard to understand, even though you can see if you jump here at the constants or numbers with the same force as here on the paradigm level, you are able to shift with 1 foot an entire system. It's like moving a mountain, but you have to give yourself the time to do that. Right? So Peter Senge put what she said in lots of words into this beautiful picture. And this is what we're going to be working on today. But because there are many ways to work on the iceberg, we figured it might be interesting to explore it a little bit more interactively. So today the proposal is to go through each of the layers. And what I'll do is I'll introduce them briefly before we go into them. And we will be, as a council or a committee of international consultants that we are today, interviewing paddle away with another hat, and exploring what is going on in the village of Santa Pau, which is actually, it's a real case study, so it might even give us some insights into it. So again, what we'll be doing is at the actions level, it's what you see is what you get, kind of the most visible problems that are facing the community, and then how they relate to each other, the people. how the system is interacting. Like, what are the relationships between people and land, or people and other people, as in animals and just the general ecosystem. So I'll leave those. I'm just going to do a mini introduction of those two layers. So what we wanted to propose is maybe give you guys, like, I would even say closer to 10 minutes if we can. And I wanted to see if you can start identifying patterns. And I'll show you how, and we do patterns both ways. So laterally, so in the actions box, in the behavior box, and in the structure box, what are the groups that you're identifying? What's going on there? And also vertically, right? So what is the story that is being told from actions, asking why, to behavior, asking why, to structure, asking why? So I'd like you in your groups to identify patterns, identify outliers, okay, so patterns and outliers, and also identify questions for when we come back from the breakout room and we get Vidal again and we can go a bit deeper. Does that make sense? I can share my screen if there's any questions, but it's essentially if you can identify patterns and outliers horizontally and vertically, right? And if you can identify questions to go deeper. Yeah. All right. I think 10 minutes should be enough, but if you can do messages saying like around 8 minutes, if you're saying we need way more time, we can give you like 5 more minutes and that's fine. Does that sound good? And I'll try not to get too excited and call you guys back too fast. All right.
Erica, can you repeat the exercise, please?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So the question, thank you very much, Viviana. That's very good. So one is identify patterns and outliers. And that would be the first question. And the second one would be identify questions to go even deeper. And here, and just to give you maybe an intro, so at the structure, we're talking about two things, informal and formal. This is hugely important and we often don't think about it. In so many countries, including Spain, there are a lot of informal stuff going on, which is really important to keep your eye on. We work a lot also in countries in civil war. So obviously you have your mafia, your narcotraficantes, your black market, all those trades that you can imagine. But here, but you also have your social movements, which is informal. Maybe there's, the climate change or Ekis, like the XR rebellion. They don't have maybe a strategic plan written up, but they have a strategy, right? So these are all of the things that we have to keep in mind. Structure, strategy, formal, informal, right? What are the strategies? And then below, what is, and I always call it the 3 Ps here, it's called the purpose, but I say, and this will be for the next one, paradigm, principles, and purpose. Okay, so it's in the chat as well. But here, so what questions can you ask that can identify structure, strategies, and the P, the bottom part, paradigm, principles, and purpose. Yeah? All right, okay, have fun then. I can't wait to see what comes up.
Erica, do you want me to recreate the breakout rooms or use the same ones as the beginning?
I don't think it matters. Let's do a different one just to shake it up, but let's maintain that for the second breakout room after this.
Okay. Let's go then.
Maybe, hold on. What we usually do is actually, even and this is a fun activity that you can do with the actual community members themselves, is introduce the systemic thinking and pattern language and have them play, like, especially if after pandemic and COVID and stuff, when we were able to like grab some posters like what we did and sent them out the first time, like have them identify the patterns and outliers, because actually they're the best ones to really go into the subtle transformative information that is generated in this kind of activity. So
You want that I share a screen?
yeah, I think so actually. Maybe, and I can move it all around if you want to. Sorry, you want to ask the questions? Patterns and outliers, so we'll go with that. See. Okay, so what patterns did people find at the action level? Or maybe just in general also?
Well, if you want in actions, Rita, here, with tourism, specific needs, logistical things, and relationships.
Tourism, touristic things, and relationships. Okay, that's great. Thank you. Anything else?
Yeah, Ana Maria here. It's maybe that people's behavior continue despite complaints. So could be a pattern that people still park their car even though there is conflict around.
Nice, interesting. Would you be able to go a bit deeper into that one? Like what you understand from that pattern?
That there is not really understanding between the both sides, I feel, and this is even though people kind of expressed their disagreement to this action, the receiver of this complaint does not really act according to what it had been said, and this could be also because it goes quite deep. I mean, because
could I maybe help Anna Maria there? Like it's a
Please.
lack of respect on either side.
Yeah.
but yeah, respect, but it could also be like something like you feel threatened when the complaint has been made. You also feel threatened that you did something wrong and you don't want to be in the wrong, so this is a form of protest towards this, or like if you don't agree, it's like a form of not silent protest, but in Romanian we have a saying is like say like them but do like you, or something like this. It's like a form of resistance to authority.
Yeah, excellent. Okay, we're getting to someplace very, very interesting with these patterns, because you can go very deep in them. In fact, I think you're even talking about, I mean, there's a real strong link, obviously, with this level here, straight to purpose and identity, because it's so cultural. But yeah, I think what you're also identifying right now in terms of like maybe there's a culture of protest, or possibly, so we can map that. Let's see what everybody else found. But there's also another element that you're talking about, which is like a lack of space or venues to express discontent. And that is super, super, super important. You know, again, with the like the Haudenosaunee community, it's all, well, Anishinaabe actually, that one more than anything, that community centers are sacred because of venting, actually, you know, and they joke about it, but like people got to complain and they also got to party and have fun and joke and stuff, but you got to have places where people can express their discontent. Excellent. Good job. Anything else? And maybe it doesn't have to be just at the actions level, but I see that you're finding ones actually that are quite transversal, and that's very powerful. Actually, that's the most powerful.
Yeah, Erica, you have a few patterns on the chat.
Ah, okay, sorry. Let's see what's going on here. Excellent. Okay, so let's start. Oh, you're hitting the nail on the head, Gerard. There's definitely a pattern between local versus foreign people. Do you want to explain that a little bit more? No, here, sí. Gerard? Right. Yeah, so this is actually, and wait, Gerard, sí. We're having trouble hearing you, but it might be your connection.
Sorry, do you ask me something?
Yeah, I was just wondering if you could explain a bit more on the local versus foreign people pattern.
Yeah, I think the people living in the village from a lot of time, they feel like some acquired rights that they don't like that the people don't living in the village have. So this is some kind of emotional distance. Sometimes in this kind of villages, the people in rural areas feel like a little poor or something like not fashion and not modern. So when the people from outside with big cars, expensive clothes and a strange attitude don't understand the local non-written laws and they feel a little bit invaded. So this makes a break point.
Excellent. Okay, so we're getting now into feelings, which is like a huge transversal. I'll put them in a line over here. Yes. So lack or sense of not feeling valued. And I might just qualify something here that foreign people in La Garrocha, if you're not from that village and you're from the next village over, you are considered foreign. Literally. Try being from Canada. Like, what's that? So yeah, that's a very big one. Okay, so thank you very much for that. In fact, that's one of the ones that we were, in fact, there's a route there and we can start going there when we get to the questions. So there's a fear of change or of the unknown. I don't know, Nika, if you want to explain that a little bit more.
Yeah, in the group, I mean, I'm sorry, I didn't hear the story because I came late. But this is from what I understood that from our group that we mentioned, and maybe it is connected with this that just Jared said, that maybe these local people feel threatened. And in the root of that is this fear of change in a negative way. And also fear of the unknown, because it's so much easier to have a negative pre-image on something unknown than after you get to know some new people, newcomers. So maybe lack of connection, maybe deeper than that.
No, really, really good. And a lot of synchronicity or synergy with the other ones that are being identified there. Super.
Yeah. And we also touched this question of local strategies in terms of maybe local politics. Yeah, because we thought about these needs for, let's say, this example of the parking lot is like, why there is is it not banned, or why isn't it some other parking lot somewhere else? So maybe it's also a question of infrastructure and local development strategies and sustainable management, if you know what I mean.
Oh, this is great. This is super. Yeah, very, very, very clear. So it's like, well, here you're already getting into like a strong pattern in the lack of develop, like in the structure part. Yeah, and I see Eulalia has put in romanticism versus practicality, which might even almost be like a strategy approach. Yeah.
Maybe to complement what Nika was saying with the lack of strategy and lack of like development plans, it could also be that mostly like there is a pattern that rural areas are left behind in this development kind of goals usually. So this like this content of the locals could also be given by yeah, a sense of being left behind and not appreciated.
Erika,
Yeah.
in my group, we've discussed two possibilities, well, between others, but these two I would like to share. One is related to the future of the village. So how do people see the village in the future? Do they see it as a touristic place? Do they want to value the old town, the main square as a tourist attraction? And would as an opportunity also for them to be, I don't know, maybe tourist guides or to have commerce there to attract more tourists. That was one way. And I had another possibility in mind that is related to the busy life that people are living. So maybe younger residents that still have younger child, maybe they are going to other villages to have other services. So they are coming back home too late. They are in a hurry, so they don't want to do these 100 meters because they are already late. So I don't know if the village has these other services or if it is, or if it has not. So people need to go outside and they come back just too tired to find a parking place. That's it.
That's super, Paola. Great. Really, really, you're also dead on. That's super. People's free time. Really, really good. Yeah, thank you. And there's also, whoa, there's a whole bunch. Okay, so you guys are on fire. So there's a pattern structure. So not working as a group is a vertical pattern, the disconnection between groups and long-term conflicts. And here you're totally right, Judith. Actually, it's one of the things that I think is, and what everybody else is saying about the differences between groups of people and local versus foreign people, is that there's a huge opportunity to explore the relationships and work on it at a relationship level. In fact, next week, you're gonna have one of the top guys in process work in Spain, actually the founder, co-founder with Anna, another woman who works here, of the National Institute for Process Work, and their specialty is conflict resolution and going deep. So they resolve leverage points at this level. So I think actually a lot of what you're saying now, all of you, is you can almost draw a line all the way down. This is super. So exactly, so this deep, there's something underneath the conflict, and that's really what would be interesting to explore. And Jochen also says, for example, at some point, like the neighborhood association, there were places and structures where people could communicate, dialogue, and resolve their conflicts. And so here's another thing, like the lack of community space is so, like, has such a deep impact. And this is, again, something really structural, but something that could be a leverage point. Miriana was saying that their group was showing that this discussion might be serving as a place to vent for many to discuss unsolved issues. You hit the nail on the head. They came to vent about everything, not just the parking lot. And in the end, obviously what we're exploring here as you're clearly identifying with great expertise. So thank you, this council of experts today, is that it's not about parking at all. It's about something much, much, much deeper. All right. So what are like opening these spaces for these issues to be solved? Exactly. Like what is this, you know, love of place is the common ground. You betcha, Eulalia. Like this is their common identity. There's a strong sense that's rooted in place. They love being surrounded by volcanoes and the Fajeda and the historical role during the war. Like there's a huge pride in, you know, resistance. Actually, it's a culture of fire and rebellion there. You know, the home place of several local rebellions in the past 1,000 years that we know of. You know, and there's a deep pride there. So also Miriam is saying offering, we can also offer ways to deal with all these like never-ending discussions, you know, so sociocracy, common vision, sense of place, it's beautiful, exactly. Yeah, all these like processes that bring people together. Yeah. Okay, so I think, what about questions? I found there's one, I think, from Josh. So when did this happen, right? So less time for each other. What's the root there? Love for places, common ground. How can we explore that a bit more? Any other questions that you identified that maybe we could ask? Oh, Eulalia.
Well, I have a technical question. Like, what is the goal? Is the goal to find a solution that makes everybody happy? Is the goal to reconciliate the locals with the foreigners and make like a deep healing of the place? Or is the goal to find a solution that is practical and like we do like this Monday to Friday and weekends, you know?
I'm getting very excited. That's an excellent question. We were hoping you were going to ask that. See, because that's exactly it. This is the perfect question, actually, Eulalia, that you would ask the community. So we can ask the community, what is the objective? You know, and you will get different answers, and then you know that you might be touching a leverage point. Yeah, but actually, sorry, before we ask Carla questions, leverage points, they do not exist at the actions in behavior level. Impossible. You'll burn yourself out. Don't even look at that. Start looking at the patterns that can root all the way down. So the leverage points here, I feel like you're already identifying them, but it's usually like really sticky points that generate a lot of energy, maybe a lot of fighting, but maybe lots of love and passion. But I feel like you're already really hitting the nail on the head. Like here, this question on how do people value natural and cultural patrimony? Huge leverage point. I'm going to just put a star on that. Star or bomb or fire. All right, so that is a perfect example of a very strong leverage point that you can explore. Any other leverage points that people would call? And they can be like actually in a post-it or in a pattern that you're already identifying.
Yeah, I was also thinking of the question to ask would be, how do the locals want to see the area developing in the future? So like the goal and like talking about this development thing, maybe to create a common vision. I think most of us kind of touched upon that.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So I would even say that's really what is the common vision. And again, you can have a couple layers in that. There's what's a common vision or purpose. I would even say actually vision. We actually don't use vision because it can be a little bit more static or rigid, right? So that's a risk when you're trying to be resilient. But I feel like we often say it as in story or as in purpose, right? So you could be talk about the story or purpose. Yeah, good one. Okay, so I'm seeing already questions. This is good. I might just flag one more. Leverage point is this local versus foreign people, or just general those differences, like how can we mediate those things? And I would actually even group fear of the unknown really closely to here with the differences in general. But there's also another leverage point, which I can't remember which group it was, but talking about strategies and of infrastructure and tourism development, dead on. After several months, it took us a while. We weren't as fast as this amazing group of people. It took us a while to get to that one. But yeah, huge leverage points there that we're already seeing the fruit. So Josh, Rita and Mir, maybe you want to shout out your question. Oh, these are good questions. I'm loving them. Yeah, maybe we can answer a couple of questions and then start wrapping up in terms of what we're feeling in terms of the big tension points that we could explore in the next class.
So what did you call on me there, was it?
Yeah.
Before just saying there was a pattern of people having less time to, I don't know, address the problem, time for each other. When did that start to happen? When did they used to, how long ago did they have time for each other? Is it that they don't have time for certain people and they do for other people, you know? So yeah, I'd like to explore that some more.
Mm-hmm. And maybe we can collect a couple so Carla can answer them all. Jochen? I don't know. Kind of, it's already written up here, but.
Let's see. Yeah, I was wondering, yeah, if it's identified, no, that the community has a value. I mean, people living together, but they usually they don't see the worth of their community unless there's a problem that affects all in the same way.
Beautiful. Thank you very much, Commission of Experts. Carla, oh, sorry, Villager.
Yeah. So yeah, this starts to happen with the industry, I think. No, before the industrial times, industrial times, all the people was working here, maybe like farmers, or yeah, the people have their own shops, no, more specific issues. And with the industrial process, all the people goes out to the place, and the daily life here starts dying. And also with the youth, all the youth go to study outside the university in the big cities or also in the high school. So the village starts to be with nobody there. No? So maybe it starts to happen 40 years ago, after my generation. And yes, of course, we are a community and we have a common challenge. And thank you for saying that, because sometimes we forget it.
Yeah, no, that's really, really important. Yeah, we're getting to the core here. Yeah. Any other questions here for Carla before maybe I think this is actually almost a perfect time to just really quickly introduce the next one that you'll be exploring more. Yeah. Nice, Julia. Excellent. Excellent. So talking from a needs, like what are your needs? You know, what are my needs? How can we reconcile them? That's a beautiful question, Julia. And the next one is, how do they celebrate? Beautiful. Now, yeah. So maybe if you want to just quickly answer the question on needs, like how they're acknowledged and whatnot. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know, but really, it's the first time that I used to think what are my needs in this town, no? So I just don't think about it. And yeah, maybe it's a good question for think more deeper, no? And maybe I cannot answer this alone because I can answer with my individual needs. But I think that we said we need to answer the collective ones. No? So thank you, experts. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, we have Gerard. I don't know if you wanted to ask, or that was from before. Levans? You're on silence or mute.
Yeah, sorry. What is the energy? What is the paper of the old castle in the top part of the village that in the past it was the owner of all the inhabitants who they must pay some kind of money or something to live there in the protection of the castle that nowadays belongs to a lord called Agata Ruiz de la Prada, living in the city, and maybe the foreigner people represent this power. How to repair that?
This is a crazy situation, and we cannot do nothing with that. It's bigger than us.
Yeah.
How we can deal with this? Help me, please.
I could keep going. I know I'm trying to be respectful because it's 6 already, but this is you are getting another leverage point that we identified, which is feudalism and relationships based on feudalism, which are so ingrained still in the village. The landlords who have more power still and are the ones leading certain policies, informal and formal. Yeah, dead on. That was actually one of them. It was like, how do we de-feudalize ourselves, or how do we decolonize ourselves, in the village? Oh, you're doing great. A+ everyone. But maybe I feel like there's so much more rich chicha, or I don't know how to say that, juice in here. But maybe we can leave that for food for thought. Just a second, I'm going to pull up, because what we would do here, I mean, you can spend 2 hours doing this in a community, and it's actually quite healing if you're able to collectively identify the leverage points and then take a break, a nice breath, because sometimes it can be very intense. Actually, we've had people be very emotional, and I mean, that's great because you're moving lots of energies here, just like Jadaj said. And what you'll be doing next week is a little bit of this, but from a different perspective. But we just wanted to introduce it because we're going to be reviewing it also when we come back in 4 weeks, or three weeks, right? So next week and the week after, you're going to have the 2 kind of like national experts in Spain on process work. So they focus at the bottom of the iceberg. They do brilliant work. So they say, what's going on underneath? How can we figure this out? What is the reality, the consensed and also more subtle realities? We work at when we're working with communities not with process work, we map it on the wall and we grab one of those leverage points that you've just identified so beautifully. So we have like the story, or your common story, or common purpose, or common vision, like Ana Maria had said. Or how do you value your natural cultural patrimony? What does community mean? What does feudalism mean? These are beautiful and pretty powerful questions. What does tourism mean? How do people want their economic model to look like, right? What does the relation, like how are the relationships, So what we would do is mark or identify what are the push factors, pull, activation is pull, this is push. Activation factors that are wanting more unity between the people despite their differences, that want a more just economy for everyone, that want, because it's not parking at all. In fact, our conversations now are actually not there. They are definitely moving much deeper, which is actually where we're hoping that there's going to be a bigger transformation. And parking is clearly just a consequence. What are the restriction factors that limit dialogue, that stop people from helping each other, that prohibit them from listening, that don't let them engage in other types of economy that are more transformative, regenerative? And from here, and this is actually a more an indigenous model that we borrow actually from, this is from the Tl'ot'olk Dene Nation, and I can write that here. In northern Canada. And if you ever want to check them out, and it's also really similar to the Tl'o Nation, Dene Nation. And it's their reconciliation process for conflicts, right? So they always create space to hear both sides, and there's no, thank you, Sharad. There's no good or bad here. There's no, those are like the evil people, or those are the lovely people, but it's everybody has something to offer for a collective solution, right? So, and that collective solution has to reconcile both interests in a respectful way. If it's compromise, there's somebody who's losing, right? So that might, I'm just going to leave that for food for thought, because we'll go much deeper into that later, and you'll be going from a different perspective with Cesar and Anna in the next couple of weeks. But we wanted to give you a bit of homework for next week in preparation for Cesar. And he asked us to ask you if you could define first, where is here? So maybe it's a community that you'd like to do an iceberg. So sorry, the exercise is to do an iceberg, exactly like what we did today, but maybe with a bit more patterning, and explain where is here. Like if it's your small community or your organization, even your family or your country, maybe. Who is us? Who are the people who are engaged? Who are the main actors? The third one is go down the iceberg then, once you have defined the framework, and identify different patterns until you reach the, spelled wrong, reach the paradigm level. Then, define leverage points, right? So next week, Cesar will ask you mostly what are your leverage points? What is something we could really dig into, explore, look at the tripas or the guts, you know, and get into it and resolve it. And he does a similar approach to reconciliation or reconciliation, but from the perspective of process work, which I think you guys will have a lot of fun with. So any questions at this point for the homework or for next week? Yeah. Or any reflections? Yeah. All good. Any last words that you would like to say, actually, as the villager?
Erika, could you explain a little bit what we need to think of in when placing, like you place the post-its very easily in actions, behavior, structure, strategies, and purpose. What is what? How do we know?
Okay, that's a good question then. The actions is something that's usually a little bit superficial. That is, and you can actually put a lot of stuff in actions and then relocate them further down after a bit more reflection. But the actions would be, what is something you would read in a newspaper? What are the headlines? Yeah, it doesn't give you a lot of information of like what's underneath. That's actually the real leverage point, but it gives you some information to start asking why. All right, so here it would be like, is there conflict? You might put that in relationships, but you can first flag it in actions. Okay, it's a lot of what questions, or how, you know, how do you guys organize? Are there conflicts? Tell me about the situation. You can even, this is an advanced level, you don't have to do it for next week, but what we actually do, we have 2 colored post-its as we go down. One goes for activation forces and the other for restriction forces. And that way, when we're done at the bottom, we actually have a map of both the leverage points according to the activator and the restrictor. If that helps, you don't have to do that, but that's like and we don't tell it to the people, we just write things on Post-its and then they're like, why do you use just 2 different colors? And then, then they realize that it's for a reason. But so for actions, it's like really just superficial. But for behavior, it's more relationships, but not just between people, but anything like trust, communication, interactions, knowledge of, as a matter of fact, I don't know. Okay. And then structures would be physical structures, but also virtual structures or constructed structures, right? So here it could include the main square. So the main square isn't apt for parking in this case, or we don't have a community center. There's no parking. But it also could be, we don't have a WhatsApp channel for everybody to know what's going on in the village, or we don't have a Facebook page or a website that helps us know, what the pulse is of what's going on. So it's all those kinds of structures, but it's still not leveraging enough. You got to ask more. So you go a bit further down and you say, okay, so what is underneath that? What are the strategies that create those structures, right? So maybe it's a government that's too tired, so their strategy is just a lack of strategy because they don't have any time to think about the importance of communication. Maybe it is a strategy of feudalism to maintain all these properties and expand properties, but of those 4 rich families in the village, which is actually what we're detecting. Like there's actually power plays in terms of property, etc. So it's all of those, is there a strategic plan in your organization or your community? Do you have internal bylaws? And so all of that, the existence of or lack of is information, and map it. And it's even better to have not like really long Post-its, but short concepts, because then you can pattern it. Like neurologically, it's easier to pattern separate concepts because you can group them. And what we do with our I don't want to give you too much homework because this isn't a master's course or anything. If you want, though, what I do with our master's students is we have them pattern it, and then with circle Post-its, they name the pattern, right? So on top of the groups, if you want. Yeah. So, and then at the bottom, it's what are the paradigms underneath this? Is it extractivist? Is it colonial? Is it nature-based? Is it relationship-based? What is underneath there that's moving and conditioning everything that comes? It's like a domino. And once you get to the bottom, then you can reconcile and shift through activating leverage points, which is what you're going to be doing with Cesar as well. And Anna, the next week is, okay, so how can we catalyze those leverage points, okay? How can we make, because a leverage point actually is usually like people can only see the problem, but then at the other side, you see actually the solution, right? I don't know if that helps. That was a long response. Was that good enough, or did you have other questions? Oh, yeah, that's okay, okay.
Yeah, so Miriana, thank you for your question. So yeah, sure, I learned a lot of with these reflections. Of course, we think that it's really needed to go more deeper and start to talk about this common vision, this community. And all of you put a lot of emphasis in this topic, and also with the celebration. you mentioned it a lot about the celebration, and I think that it is so powerful in a participatory process, no, that put the celebration in the center of this. So thank you guys, because yes, of course, I learned a lot of us. So maybe come back with another with another time. I can recollect more of you. Thank you.
And if you want to know more, we could share an update in real time or real life as how the next process goes. Yeah, I think it'll be cool, and we can integrate some of these really lovely insights. So
thank you.
Gracias. All right, so so you'll be with Cesar next week, and I'm sure you have lots of fun. Yeah, and Alex will always be there.
Thank you, Alex.
Okay, lovely to see you all then, and we'll see you in a few weeks.
See you.
Okay, salud.